I'm very pleased to say I'm back in the van, as you can see. So what I'm working on this evening is I have, during the move process, continued working on the Android Auto, OpenAuto Pro installation. Gotten some of the things that I didn't have working are now working, like the hands-free protocol, the navigation, voice commands and all that kind of thing are now working. And I've tested a nice long HDMI cable working with the camera, all that's working great. So I can begin to do the actual install of that now. So I'm going to put in the HDMI cable now, start looking at getting the dash, the old radio pulled out of the dash, and how I can make the new one fit. One of the first things I have to figure out is this cable actually long enough? Looks pretty good. I think I'm going to get my yellow tongue. Got my tape. I've been tearing into the dash, as you can see. Figured out how to get the stereo out. Didn't film that, so I didn't really know what I was doing. It took a while to figure out how to take it apart, but there's the cabling from the original stereo. I think most of the wires I'm going to need are already going to be in there, so I just need to do a bit of testing. Got my meter, I'm going to test that out. Then I've got to take the bezel part of it, take that inside, measure it up, and design and 3D print a piece that will marry the bezel with the touchscreen and Raspberry Pi and the amplifier and everything that'll end up being mounted in here.
Some time later.
Here I'm beginning to prototype a mount for the new stereo. I've modelled in 3D the basic first part of the shape, and now I'm printing it to test and make sure that the fit is all going to work alright, and then from there I can work out how to model the rest of it and how it's all going to fit together and everything. But because this is the part that will interface with the bezel that has come out of the van, it needs to be right, and the tolerances will be fairly tight, so printing that part of it first, can test and make sure that fits, and then once I know that that's right, I can build the rest of it in CAD and print it out complete. Okay, so it's finished printing. Let's see whether it fits. I've cut the center portion out from the bezel here, And this piece should go in here. It's a little bit too much play, I think. We need to make it a little bit bigger sideways and maybe a little tighter up and down ways. Sitting at about the right thickness. Let's see whether it fits on the screen. Doesn't sit in quite far enough. This board on the back of the screen is actually a couple of millimeters bigger than the front of the screen is. So the way I've modelled it, it's meant to sit right down in there, and then the next layer will be what these fixing points fix to. A little bit of adjustment needed, but I'm on the right track.
Some time later.
I've made the changes to the design that I needed, added a backing plate for the screen to screw to, which will clip into the front panel. The front panel, I've added clips to that so that it will clip into the existing van bezel. Once I've finalised the design, I will print it in PETG, which is a similar plastic to the plastic that water bottles are made from, much more suitable for being permanently installed in the vehicle. So we'll see how it all fits when this is done. Hopefully this is going to work, and then move on to the next part of the project. G'day, it's Saturday, time to work on the van. Last night I started printing the next iteration of the mount and bezel for the OpenAuto Pro project. So I'll just quickly show you what I've got going on there. I've decided to print it in ABS, and so you can see behind me here a makeshift enclosure that I've made, because ABS is particularly difficult to print without an enclosure. It warps and lifts off the bed and prints fail. So let's head out and get started. One of the problems with a project as big and complex as this, where there's so many different elements to it, can be deciding what's priority, what should I do next, what order should I do things in. And so you can see that I've done some of the insulation but not finished it, and then realised actually I need to put a frame around the window for the cladding to fit to before I can finish the insulation. So I want to finish the insulation. The other thing I need to do, the reason I've been working on the OpenAuto Pro installation, is because I needed to get that HDMI cable in there and be confident that I can make it all work before I lose access to some of this area. So lots of things to do, but today I want to make up the frames and put them on around the windows, and then crack on with the insulation. I want to get that part of the job finished so I can move on. Let me show you what my plan is for this. I've just ripped a whole bunch of bits of pine, and they're 12mm thick by 19mm wide, and they're going to go around the window frame like that. I'll glue them onto the wall, and then I'll be able to cut a piece of 3mm ply which will fit nicely around the window and come up against the window frame itself. So to make that fit nicely in there with the bead of glue in there, I'm just going to round over one corner of these pieces of pine. Dry fitted all of this. So this one where I've taken the insulation off, I figure I'm going to need to prop it to make sure that everything stays in place as the glue goes off. The other ones, I don't think I'll need clamps and props and things. Wiggle it around to squish the glue down and make sure it gets good contact everywhere. One down, 3 to go. I wasn't going to try and shoot brads into the corners, but I think they need them. This is just a little reminder. Be careful with your brad nailer, people. You might shoot one into your knuckle. But don't tell Melanie I did that. Well, I've given up on ABS, not because I couldn't get it to stick to the build plate, but because of layer adhesion issues. It's just the prints weren't strong enough for what I need. So I'm using PETG, which has stronger layer adhesion but lower melting point. So hopefully it will work out all right. So what I have now is, here's the bezel from the van, and this part my screen will fit into, And then in the back, we'll go the screen like so. So there we go. And then on the back of the screen, we'll fit this part, which will screw into the screen and into the back of the bezel. To keep the screen in place, and also has upstands for supporting the electronics. So the electronics will be mounted on the next layer here. Pretty pleased with that so far. I've got to test the fit and everything properly, but looks like it should work out. So here's roughly how it looks with the electronics on it. So this is the buck converter, which will take 12 volts in and output 5 volts to supply the Raspberry Pi and its circuitry. This is a time delay relay that will take 12 volts in and an ignition signal. When the ignition's on, it will power up the relay, which will power up the buck converter. When the ignition shuts down, it will stay on for 30 seconds and then shut off, killing the power to the buck converter. And then this is a bank of relays. This middle one is for the ignition, so that will also get an ignition circuit trigger, and when the ignition is shut off, this relay will change state immediately, and the Raspberry Pi, one of the GPIO pins, will sense that, and I've written a little Python script that will see that change and shut down the Raspberry Pi gracefully before the power feed to the buck converter is removed completely, and then the Raspberry Pi has no power at all. This one will sense the reverse lights and trigger the reverse camera when the vehicle's in reverse, and this one will sense the headlights and change the display from day mode to night mode when it senses that the headlights are on. I've got a spare up there which I can use for something else if I think of something else that I want to use it for, but that's how it's going to be. Now that I've printed the first version of this, I've got a few little changes, tweaks that I want to make to it, and then I'll reprint it. But I'm pretty happy with how that's coming along. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for joining me. As usual, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.